I watched some movies recently. I didn't shake it. It's not any better. Alright, so the first movie that I saw recently is Candyman 2021. This is a sequel to the 1992 original classic. Kind of taking the Halloween 2018 route and being a direct sequel that ignores everything, all the other sequels from like the 90s and early 2000s and stuff. I like this movie, but it's nowhere near as good as it could have been, which is a real shame because I really like the original. This is a movie that feels like it has a lot to say, but it doesn't really know how to say it. Technically, this movie is really well done. It looks amazing. It has great music. All the performances were pretty great. And Yahya Abdul-Mateen II, I believe is his name, in the lead role. He's great. It's really beautiful. Nia DaCosta, this is the first project I've seen of hers, but she does an amazing job in this movie. So she's obviously very, very talented. Unfortunately, this movie's biggest problem is that it feels confused. The first half is really solid, like building of tension and kind of building towards, a really explosive climax. But then in the second half, it really starts to fumble it, and it feels like it doesn't know, it knows where it wants to go, but it doesn't know how to get there. And so what we end up with is a climax that feels, it's trying to pay off things that were never set up. And so it ends up just being a really confusing climax to the movie. It was written by 3 different people, and it feels like it. There's lots of moments in this movie that feel like they were from a previous draft, but then everything else got cut except for that one scene from that draft got kept in, which ends up making the movie, it kind of just feels like padding. It's like stuff like that where it just feels like they put that in because like we need more kills, but you don't though, because that's not the point of Candyman. Candyman is a slasher movie only really by technicality. It was basically made a slasher movie in retrospect by the sequels being more slashery, so you don't need to pump up your body count. Tony Todd is in it for some reason. He shows up, spoiler alert, but not really. He shows up in like the last 5 seconds for no fucking reason. Overall, I do like this movie. I think it's good, but I don't think it's as good as it could have been, which is a real shame. I would recommend this movie. I think if you like the original Candyman, I think that this movie does a serviceable job. So overall, I'm gonna give Candyman 2021 a 6 out of 10. Next up is a big one. It's called Dune. I already made a video about this, if you couldn't tell. I love Dune. I was really excited to see this movie, and you could say maybe that blinded me a little bit, but I've rewatched this movie a couple of times because it's on HBO Max, and honestly, my opinion has not changed much. I think that this movie is great. Denis Villeneuve, who directed this, he also directed stuff like Blade Runner 2049 and Arrival. He continues to put out just fantastic stuff. Without the world building, the story would feel hollow. So this movie is a slow burn for sure. It really takes its time in establishing characters and concepts, but overall I never felt that it was like too bad in like exposition dumping. All the performances here are pretty exceptional. Timothée Chalamet, I think he does a great job in this movie as Paul. He delivers a really subdued performance, but honestly that is what Paul is like in the book, so it's pretty accurate. Everyone in this movie did a great job. Rebecca Ferguson, Timothée Chalamet, I think are the 2 real standouts here. If you're watching this movie for Zendaya, I'll tell you right now, you're gonna be disappointed. She's basically only there in dreams in the last like 20 minutes of the movie. So if you're here for her, you're not getting much out of it. I'd say the only real problem I have with the movie is that there is some odd pacing in the last third. The third act basically feels like a really extended falling action from the climax, and it's not bad per se, but it does feel a little bit like, you know, I was as much as I was enjoying the movie, I was checking my watch a little bit towards the end. Overall, I think it's a pretty minor issue. I still think this movie is really greatly done, far better than the 1984 version by David Lynch, even though that movie, I don't really like to call it movie the Lynch version because it's not really his vision, because the studio fucking chopped through that movie in a wood chipper. Yeah, that's about all I have to say about this one, and I'm gonna give Dune 2021 an 8 out of 10. I thought if I tried it again, I would like it, but it's still not. It's just, I give this Lemonade a 2 out of 10. All right, next is Halloween Kills. So this is the kind of highly awaited sequel to Halloween 2018, which overall pretty positively received movie. I did cover both of these in the slasher speed round video I did a couple weeks back. My rating on this movie has changed since then. Let me say right now, this movie's very, very stupid, super dumb. If you loved Halloween 2018, I can totally see why you would probably fucking hate this movie, because it doesn't even feel like it's done by the same crew. This movie's dumb as hell. This movie is the middle movie of a trilogy, and as such, it really suffers from middle movie syndrome. It's basically the fact that the middle movie of a trilogy is always the hardest part to do, because in the first movie, you introduce the characters and the action, fine. The last movie, you know, you're tying up everything, you're finishing your plot, you're tying up all your plot threads. The middle one is the hardest because you have to resolve enough for this movie to feel satisfying, but also keep enough for the next movie to be interesting, while also introducing new things, but not too much. So the middle movie is always the hardest part to do, and this movie does not do a good job. So what we end up doing is pushing all the characters, mainly Laurie, that we care about, to the side, while letting a bunch of new, stupid characters take the forefront who we hate because they're stupid. This movie is really, really trying to be about something. 2018 was kind of lauded for being about, like, trauma. In this movie, it feels way more ham-fisted. It's trying to be about, you know, mob mentality and vigilante justice and all that shit. But it's just totally failing because everyone's stupid and we hate them. This movie is so dumb that it kind of went so far that it became enjoyable to me. I was so invested in how dumb that this movie was becoming, and I was like, how far is this gonna go? Luckily, this movie does not ruin Michael Myers, which is, you know, thank God. That's like the bare minimum, but they didn't. Plenty of the sequels do. Michael is still threatening, imposing, scary in this movie. He's fucking brutal. He kills a lot of people in very, very violent ways. It's a very bloody movie, very gory. Music was great. John Carpenter comes back again, and he delivers a much more kind of upbeat, sort of electric guitar-y score than the last one. Overall, I would probably not recommend this movie in general, but I think if you're a slasher fan, that you'll probably be able to get some fun out of this. And overall, I'm going to give Halloween Kills a 4 out of 10. I've only seen it once though, so it might go down to a 3. Evil Dies Tonight. And the last movie I'm going to be talking about tonight is Last Night in Soho. This is the latest movie by Edgar Wright, obviously, who is probably one of the most talented directors of our time. This guy is fucking talented. And so when I heard that he was taking a dive into full-on horror, I was really excited. And for the most part, I don't think this movie disappointed me. The first half was really gripping. He does a great job with these characters. The main protagonist, Ellie, who is portrayed by Thomasin McKenzie, she's a great character. She's really, you're invested in her plight I think it's a very relatable kind of story. It's really well done. And then the second half, it sort of loses its steam. It starts to become repetitive. In horror movies, one of the best ways to do things is that you have a scary scene and then you follow that up with like a cool down scene that's not scary, because it lets your audience cool down and get, you know, they're sort of ready for when the next scare shows up. But this movie, in the second half especially, it just has like a scare scene, and then it goes in the next scene, and you think that it's going to be a cool down scene, and then it's another scare scene, and it starts to just become tiring and sort of repetitive. And I will say that that's probably the biggest issue with this movie, is that it feels like it's not sure what it wants to be. Because at first, it's a cautionary tale against over-romanticizing the past and like the rose-tinted glasses of nostalgia. It's like, don't over-romanticize the past. Sure, the 60s were glamorous and swinging, but there was also a lot of shit going on underneath the surface. But then in the second half, it sort of takes this left turn into trauma and abuse and stuff like that, like really, really heavy topics. And I'm not qualified to speak on how well those things were executed, but it definitely felt a bit jarring. And this is further complicated by the ending, which really sort of throws it for a loop and makes you kind of question everything that came before. And I'm not sure how much of a good thing that is in this case. Technically, again, this movie is great. It's very well shot and colorful. The music is great. They use a lot of like 60s music in the soundtrack that's all really well used. The cast is great. Thomasin McKenzie carries this movie. If you weren't convinced that she was a fantastic actor from Leave No Trace and Jojo Rabbit, she is fucking amazing in this movie. She really, really carries it. I don't think anyone in this movie was bad, although I will say the 60s cast is very underused. If you're coming to this movie for Anya Taylor-Joy, you're going to probably be disappointed, because she only really gets to act in like 2 scenes, and the rest of the time she just kind of stares at the camera menacingly or walks around ominously. Matt Smith, I think, is a great actor who has not had much of a chance to shine outside of stuff like his early stuff like Doctor Who. He only has like 2 modes in this movie, and that's cool, suave guy, and abusive misogynist. So it was a bit of a letdown on that end. This movie's very Giallo-esque. Like, obviously it's very inspired by Giallos. I guess we're bringing Giallos back. Fuck it, we're bringing slashers back, why not? And overall, I really enjoyed it, even though it did have some very glaring problems. I really hope that Edgar Wright takes another swing at pure horror, because I really do think that he's got something here. It just needs to be kind of honed. Definitely recommend this movie. I think it's a lot of fun, even if it's not the best. So overall, I would give Last Night in Soho a 6, maybe a 7 out of 10. I'm sort of conflicted on this movie until I see it again. I'll give it a 7 because Thomasin McKenzie is hot, and if she sees this movie and I give it a 7, maybe she'll kiss me. Call me.